Pax vobiscum, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to continue reading Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. We will begin today with Chapter 16, The Fire. Later on in the evening, a traveler's horse was brought in by the second hostler, and while he was cleaning him, a young man with a pipe in his mouth lounged into the stable to gossip. "I say, Towler," said the hostler, "just run up the ladder into the loft and put down some hay in the horse's rack, will you? Only lay down your pipe." "All right," said the other, and went up through the trap door, and I heard him step across the floor overhead and put down the hay. James came in to look at us the last thing, and then the door was locked. I cannot say how long I slept, nor what time in the night it was, but I woke up very uncomfortable, though I hardly knew why. I got up. The air seemed all thick and choking. I heard Ginger coughing. One of the other horses seemed very restless. It was quite dark, and I could see nothing, but the stable seemed full of smoke, and I hardly knew how to breathe. The trap-door had been left open, and I thought that was the place it came through. I had listened and heard a soft rushing sort of noise and a low crackling and snapping. I did not know what it was, but there was something in the sound so strange that made me tremble all over. The other horses were all awake. Some were pulling at their halters, others stamping. At last I heard steps outside, and the hostler who had put up the traveler's horse burst into the stable with a lantern and began to untie the horses and try to lead them out. But he seemed in such a hurry and so frightened himself that he frightened me still more. The first horse would not go with him. He tried the second and the third, and they too would not stir. He came to me next and tried to drag me out of the stall by force, but of course that was no use. He tried us all by turns and then left the stable. No doubt we were very foolish, but danger seemed to be all round, and there was nobody we knew to trust in, and all was strange and uncertain. The fresh air that had come in through the open door made it easier to breathe, but the rushing sound overhead grew louder, and I looked upward through the bars of my empty rack, and I saw a red light flickering on the wall. Then I heard a cry of "Fire!" outside, and the old hostler quietly and quickly came in. He got one horse out, went to another, but the flames were playing round the trap door, and the roaring overhead was dreadful. The next thing I heard was James's voice, quiet and cheery as it always was. "Come on, my beauties, it's time for us to be off. So wake up, come along." I stood nearest to the door, so he came to me first, patting me as he came in. "Come on, Beauty, on with your bridle, my boy. We'll soon be out of this smother." It was on in no time. Then he took his scarf off his neck and tied it lightly over my eyes, and patting and coaxing me, he led me out of the stable. Safe in the yard, he slipped the scarf off my eyes and shouted, "Here, somebody! Take this horse while I go back for the other." A tall, broad man stepped forward and took me, and James darted back into the stable. I set up a shrill whinny as I saw him go. Ginger told me afterward that whinny was the best thing I could have done for her, for had she not heard me outside, she would have never have had the courage to come out. There was much confusion in the yard, the horses being got out of the other stables, and the carriages and gigs being pulled out of the houses and sheds, lest the flames should spread further. On the other side of the yard, windows were thrown open, and people were shouting all sorts of things. But I kept my eye fixed on the stable door, where the smoke poured thicker than ever, and I could see flashes of red light. Presently I heard above all the stir and din a loud, clear voice, which I knew was the master's. "James Howard! James Howard, are you there?" There was no answer, but I heard a crash of something falling violently in the stable, and the next moment I gave a loud, joyful neigh, for I saw James coming through the smoke, leading Ginger with him. She was coughing violently, and he was not able to speak. "My brave lad," said the master, laying his hand on his shoulder, "are you hurt?" James shook his head, for he could not yet speak. "Aye," said the big man who held me. "He is a brave lad, and no mistake." "And now," said the master, "when you have got your breath, James, we'll get out of this place as quickly as we can." And we were moving toward the entry, when from the marketplace there came the sound of galloping feet and loud rumbling wheels. "'Tis the fire engine! The fire engine!" shouted 2 or 3 voices. "Stand back! Make way!" And clattering and thundering over the stones, 2 horses dashed into the yard with a heavy engine behind them. The firemen leaped to the ground. There was no need to ask where the fire was, as it was rolling up in a great blaze from the roof. We got out as fast as we could into the broad, quiet marketplace. The stars were shining, and except for the noise behind us, all was still. Master led the way to a large hotel on the other side, and as soon as the hostler came, he said, "James, I must now hasten back to your mistress. I trust the horses entirely to you. Order whatever you think is needed." And with that, he was gone. The master did not run, but I never saw a mortal man walk so fast as he did that night. There was a dreadful sound before we got into our stalls. The shrieks of those poor horses that were left burning to death in the stable. It was very terrible, and it made both Ginger and me feel very bad. We, however, were taken in and were well done by. The next morning the master came to see how we were and to speak to James. I did not hear much, for the hostler was rubbing me down, but I could see that James looked very happy, and I thought the master was proud of him. Our mistress had been so much alarmed in the night that the journey was put off till the afternoon, so James had the morning at hand, and went first to the inn to see about our harness and carriage, and then to hear more about the fire. When he came back, we heard him tell the hostler all about it. At first no one could guess how the fire had been caused, but at last a man said he saw Dick Towler go into the stable with a pipe in his mouth, and when he came out he had not one, and went to the tap for another. Then the under-hostler said that he had asked Dick to go up the ladder to put down some hay, but told him to lay down his pipe first. Dick denied taking the pipe with him, but no one believed him. I remember our John Manley's rule, never allow a pipe in the stable, and thought it ought to be the rule everywhere. James said that the roof and floor had all fallen in, and that only the black walls were standing. The 2 poor horses that could not be got out were buried under the burnt rafters and tiles. The rest of our journey was very easy, and a little after sunset we reached the house of my master's friend. We were taken into a clean, snug stable. There was a kind coachman who made us very comfortable, and who seemed to think a good deal of James when he heard about the fire. "There is one thing quite clear, young man," he said. "Your horses know who they can trust. It is one of the hardest things in the world to go get horses out of a stable when there is either fire or flood. I don't know why they won't come out, but they won't. Not 1 in 20. We stopped 2 or 3 days at this place and then returned home. All went well on the journey, and we were glad to be in our own stable again, and John was equally glad to see us. Before he and James left us for the night, James said, "I wonder who is coming in my place." "Little Joe Green at the lodge," said John. "Little Joe Green? Why, he's a child!" "He's 14 and a half, said John. "But he is such a little chap." "Yes, he is small, but he is quick and willing, and kind-hearted too, and then he wishes very much to come, and his father would like it, and I know the master would like to give him a chance. He said if I thought that he would not do, he would look for a bigger boy, but I said I was quite agreeable to try him for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, said James. Why, it will be 6 months before he can be of much use. It will make you a deal of work, John." "Well," said John with a laugh, "work and I are very good friends. I was never afraid of work yet." "You are a very good man," said James. "I wish I may ever be like you." "I don't often speak of myself," said John, "but as you are going away from us out into the world to shift for yourself, I'll tell you how I look on these things. I was just as old as Joseph when my father and mother died of the fever within 10 days of each other, and left me and my crippled sister Nellie alone in the world, without a relation that we could look to for help. I was a farmer's boy, not earning enough to keep myself, much less both of us, and she must have gone to the workhouse but for our mistress, Nellie calls her angel, and she has good right to do so. She went and hired a room for her with old Widow Mallet, and she gave her knitting and needlework when she was able to do it. And when she was ill, she sent her dinners and many nice, comfortable things. It was like a mother to her. Then the master, he took me into the stable under old Norman, the coachman that was then. I had my food at the house and my bed in the loft and a suit of clothes and 3 shillings a week, so that I could help Nellie. Then there was Norman. He might have turned round and said at his age he could not be troubled with a raw boy from the plough-tail. But he was like a father to me, and took no end of pains with me. And the old man died some years after I stepped into this place, and now, of course, I have top wages, and can lay by for any rainy day or a sunny day as it may happen, and Nellie is as happy as a bird. So you see, James, I am not the man that should turn up his nose at a little boy and vex a good, kind master. No. I shall miss you very much, James, but we shall pull through, and there's nothing like doing a kindness when 'tis put in your way, and I am glad I can do it. Then, said James, you don't hold with that saying, everybody look after himself and take care number 1? No, indeed, said John. Where should I and Nellie have been if master and mistress and old Norman had only taken care of number 1? Why, she in the workhouse and I hoeing turnips. Where would Black Beauty and Ginger have been if you had only thought of number 1? Why, roasted to death. No, Jim, no. That is a selfish, heathenish saying, whoever uses it. And any man who thinks he has nothing to do but take care of number 1, why, it's a pity. But what he had been drowned like a puppy or a kitten before he got his eyes open. That's what I think, said John with a very decided jerk of his head. James laughed at this, but there was a thickness in his voice when he said, You have been my best friend except for my mother. I hope you won't forget me. No, lad, no, said John. And if ever I can do you a good turn, I hope you won't forget me. The next day Joe came to the stables to learn all he could before James left. He learned to sweep the stable, to bring in the straw and hay. He began to clean the harness and help to wash the carriage. As he was quite too short to do anything in the way of grooming Ginger and me, James taught him up upon Merrylegs, for he was to have full charge of him, under John. He was a nice, bright little fellow, and always came whistling to his work. Merrylegs was a good deal put out at being mauled about, as he said, by a boy who knew nothing. But toward the end of the 2nd week he told me confidently that he thought the boy would turn out well. At last the day came when James had to leave us. Cheerful as he always was, he looked quite downhearted that morning. You see, he said to John, I'm leaving a great deal behind. My mother and Betsy and you and a good master and mistress, and then the horses and my old Merrylegs. At the new place there will not be a soul that I shall know. If it were not that I shall get a higher place and be able to help my mother better, I don't think I should have made up my mind to it. It is a real pinch, John. Aye, James, lad, so it is. But I should not think much of you if you would leave your home for the first time and not feel it. Cheer up, you'll make friends there, and if you get on well, as I am sure you will, it will be a fine thing for your mother, and she'll be proud enough that you have gotten to such a good place as that. So John cheered him up, but everyone was sorry to lose James. As for Merrylegs, he pined after him for several days and went quite off his appetite. So John took him out several mornings with a leading rein when he exercised me, and trotting and galloping by my side got up the little fellow's spirits again, and he was soon all right. Joe's father would often come in and give a little help, as he understood the work, and Joe took a great deal of pains to learn, and John was quite encouraged about him. One night, a few days after James had left, I had eaten my hay and was laying down in my straw fast asleep, when I was suddenly roused by the stable bell ringing very loudly. I heard the door of John's house open, and his feet running up to the hall. He was back again in no time. He unlocked the stable door and came in calling out, "Wake up, Beauty! You must go well now if you ever did." And almost before I could think, he had got on the saddle on my back and a bridle on my head. He had just round for his coat, and then took me at a quick trot up to the hall door. The squire stood there with a lamp in his hand. "Now, John," he said, "ride for your life. That is, for your mistress's life. There is not a moment to lose. Give this note to Dr. White. Give your horse a rest at the inn and be back as soon as you can." John said, "Yes, sir," and was on my back in a minute. The gardener who had lived at the lodge had heard the bell ring, and was ready with the gate open, and away we went through the park and through the village, and down the hill till we came to the toll gate. John called very loud and thumped upon the door, and the man was soon out and flung open the gate. "Now," said John, "do you keep the gate open for the doctor. Here's the money." And off he went again. There was before us a long piece of level road by the riverside. John said to me, "Now, Beauty, do your best." And so I did. I wanted for no whip nor spur, and for 2 miles I galloped as fast as I could lay my feet on the ground. I don't believe that my old grandfather, who won the race at Newmarket, could have gone any faster. When we came to the bridge, John pulled me up a little and patted my neck. "Well done, Beauty, good old fellow," he said. He would have let me go slower, but my spirit was up, and I was off again as fast as before. The air was frosty, the moon was bright. It was very pleasant. When we came through a village, then through a dark wood, then uphill, then downhill, till after 8 miles' run we came to the town, through the streets and into the marketplace. It was all quiet still, except for the clatter of my feet on the stones. Everybody was asleep. The church clock struck 3 as we drew up at Dr. White's door. John rang the bell twice, and then knocked on the door like thunder. A window was thrown up, and Dr. White, in his nightcap, put out his head and said, "What do you want?" "Mrs. Gordon is very ill, sir. Master wants you to go at once. He thinks she will die if you cannot get there. Here is a note." "Wait," he said. "I will come." He shut the window and was soon at the door. "The worst of it is," he said, "that my horse has been out all day and is quite done up. My son has just been sent for, and he has taken the other. Oh, what is to be done? Can I have your horse?" "Well, he's come in a gallop nearly all the way, sir, and I was to give him a rest here. But I think my master would not be against it if you think fit, sir." "All right," he said. "I will soon be ready." John stood by me and stroked my neck. It was very hot. The doctor came out with his riding whip. "Oh, you need not take that, sir," said John. "Black Beauty will go till he drops. Take care of him, sir, if you can. I should not like any harm to come to him." "No, no, John," said the doctor. "I hope not." And in a minute we had left John far behind. I will not tell about our way back. The doctor was a heavier man than John, and not so good a rider. However, I did my very best. The man at the toll gate had it open. When we came to the hill, the doctor drew me up. "Now, my good fellow," he said, "take some breath." I was glad he did, for I was nearly spent. But that breathing helped me on, and soon we were at the park. Joe was at the lodge gate. My master was at the hall door, for he had heard us coming. He spoke not a word. The doctor went into the house with him, and Joe led me to the stable. I was glad to get home. My legs shook under me, and I could only stand and pant. I had not a dry hair on my body. The water ran down my legs, and I steamed all over, Joe used to say, like a pot on fire. Poor Joe. He was young and small, and yet he knew very little, and his father, who would have helped him, had been sent to the next village. But I'm sure he did the very best he knew. He rubbed my legs and my chest, but he did not put my warm cloth on me. He thought I was so hot I should not like it. Then he gave me a pail full of water to drink. It was cold and very good, and I drank it all. Then he gave me some hay and some corn, and thinking he had done all right, he went away. Soon I began to shake and tremble, and turned deadly, deadly cold. My legs ached, my loins ached, my chest ached, and I felt sore all over. Oh, how I wished for my warm, thick cloth as I stood and trembled. I wished for John, but he had 8 miles to walk, so I lay down in my straw and tried to sleep. After a long while I heard John at the door. I gave a low moan, for I was in great pain. He was at my side in a moment, stooping down by me. I could not tell him how I felt, but he seemed to know it all. He covered me up with 2 or 3 warm cloths, then ran to the house for some hot water. He'd made me some warm gruel, which I drank, and then I think I went to sleep. John seemed to be very much put out. I heard him say to himself over and over again, stupid boy, no cloth put on, and I dare say the water was cold too. Boys are no good. But Joe was a good boy, after all. I was now very ill. A strong inflammation had attacked my lungs, and I could not draw my breath without pain. John nursed me night and day. He would get up 2 or 3 times in the night to come to me. My master, too, often came to see me. "Oh, my poor Beauty," he said one day. "My good horse, you saved your mistress's life, Beauty. Yes, you saved her life." I was very glad to hear that, for it seems the doctor said that if we had been a little longer it would have been too late. John told my master he never saw a horse go so fast in his life. It seemed as if the horse knew what was the matter. Of course I did, though John thought not. At least I knew as much as this, that John and I must go at the top of our speed, and that it was for the sake of the mistress. I do not know how long I was ill. Mr. Bond, the horse doctor, came every day. One day he bled me. John held a pail for the blood. I felt very faint after it and thought I should die, and I believe they all thought so too. Ginger and Merrylegs had been moved into the other stables so that I might be quiet, for the fever made me very quick of hearing. Any little noise seemed quite loud, and I could tell every one's footsteps going to and from the house. I knew all that was going on. One night John had to give me a draught. Thomas Green came in to help him. After I had taken it, and John had made me as comfortable as he could, he said he should stay half an hour to see how the medicine settled. Thomas said he would stay with him, so they went and sat down on a bench that had been brought into Merryleg's stall, and put down the lantern at their feet, so that I might not be disturbed by the light. For a while both men sat silent, and then Tom Green said in a low voice, "I wish, John, you'd say a kind word to Joe. The boy is quite broken-hearted. Can't eat his meals, can't smile. He says he knows it was all his fault, though he is sure he did the best he knew, and he says if Beauty dies no one will ever speak to him again. It goes to my heart to hear him. I think you might have to give him just a word. He's not a bad boy." After a short pause, John said slowly, "You must not be too hard on me, Tom. I know he meant no harm. I never said he did. And I know that he is not a bad boy. But you see, I am sore myself. That horse is the pride of my heart, to say nothing of his being such a favorite with the master and mistress. To think that his life may be flung away in this manner is more than I can bear. But if you think I am hard on the boy, I will try to give him a good word tomorrow. That is, I mean, if Beauty is better." "Well, John, thank you. I knew you did not wish to be too hard, and I'm glad you see it was only ignorance." John's voice almost startled me as he answered, "Only ignorance! Only ignorance! How can you talk about only ignorance? Don't you know that is the worst thing in the world next to wickedness? And which does the most mischief heaven only knows. If people can say, 'Oh, I did not know, I did not mean any harm,' they think it is all right. I suppose Martha Mulwash did not mean to kill that baby when she dosed it with Dalby and soothing syrups, but she did kill it, and was tried for manslaughter." "Well, and serve her right too," said Tom. "A woman should not undertake to nurse a tender little child without knowing what is good and what is bad for it." "Bill Starkey," continued John, "did not mean to frighten his brother into fits when he dressed up like a ghost and ran after him in the moonlight. But he did. And that bright, handsome little fellow, that might have been the pride of any mother's heart, is just no better than an idiot, and never will be if he lives to be 80 years old. You were a good deal cut up yourself, Tom, 2 weeks ago, when those young ladies left your hothouse door open, with a frosty east wind blowing right in. You said it killed a good deal many of your plants." "A good many," said Tom. "There was not one of the tender cuttings that was not nipped off. I shall have to strike out all over again, and the worst of it is that I don't know where to get fresh ones. I was nearly mad when I came in and saw what was done." "And yet," said John, "I'm sure those young ladies did not mean it. It was only ignorance." I heard no more of this conversation, for the medicine did well and sent me to sleep, and in the morning I felt much better. But I often thought of John's words when I came to know more of the world. And that concludes our reading of Part 5 of Black Beauty by Anna Sewell. And again, rereading this book, I can't talk suddenly, rereading this book, after many years of just having it sort of drifting about my memory, it makes it even more eye-opening to me, and I am more firmly established that this is not just a horse book, as many people have told me. This book is about life, and I think we can see that in these, especially in these chapters here, and have some very valuable lessons, not just about the sanctity of animals and the usefulness that they have, the partnership that animals have with us, and the fact that animals have allowed wonderful things to happen. They have, particularly horses, the relationship with human beings. They pulled our carts originally before we figured out the internal combustion engine. In the case of Black Beauty, they gave us wings. They helped us get from place to place faster, and it was because of them that, messages were able to be run, doctors were able to be fetched, and we should treat them, with respect and with dignity, because they are our partners on this earth. And particularly the last chapter we read, titled Only Ignorance. This is one I will be definitely discussing more in depth in the Vestavox episode about this book, but it just resonated with me a bit. There have been occasions where I personally can recall where out of my own ignorance I hurt people, and I hurt people I cared about. And I think what John is saying is very important. He is not demonizing little, Joe Green, saying he's a horrible child. How could he possibly do this? He acknowledges that he acted out of ignorance. But even though Joe Green acted out of ignorance, his actions still caused harm to Black Beauty, still caused harm to an animal that John had come to greatly care about. And just because you were ignorant of something does not excuse the hurt that you cause through your actions. One example I can think of to sort of relate that to is in my own life. I had a partner who I wouldn't necessarily say they were ignorant, they were extremely intelligent, but I would say they were ignorant in the sense of they weren't quite aware of how their words and their actions affected me. And so they would simply just do things without any thought about what I would think about it. And they would do these things and then would be quite shocked and, would say, "Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like that. I had no idea you felt this way." And then would be upset at me for being upset at them instead of acknowledging, "Oh, I have hurt you. I may not have realized that I hurt you, but I did hurt you, and I am sorry that I hurt you. So let us discuss what happened, where the ignorance lay, so that I may learn from this experience and may not hurt you again." And I think that is a very important lesson that especially nowadays, that people, especially young adults, teenagers, need to sort of come to terms with, is that you can do things with good intentions or to the best of your ability and still hurt people. And that is simply life. And all you can really do is acknowledge when someone comes to you and says, "You have hurt me," and say, "I have hurt you. I am sorry I have hurt you. And please, let us discuss how I can not hurt you in the future." I think if we approach things like that, a lot of misunderstandings would be remiss. So just my musings on that chapter for now, but definitely we'll be doing a deeper dive during the Vestavox episode. So we will have another Black Beauty reading selection on Monday, and then tomorrow, Saturday, I will be completing my playthrough of Dear Esther. And the game did not end the way that I thought it did. Yes, but it was absolutely fascinating, and I almost want to do a Vestavox episode on that game alone because it was so intricate and so interesting. But with that being said, I am now rambling, so I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Goodbye.